Try to describe a king by his appearance, you will describe him in several ways, but none of them will match the description of King David. The whole sequence of the arrival of David's soul into this world is in secret and under a great and huge cover. This whole move is very unnatural, and everything is done to hide and conceal King David. Perhaps all of this is to hide his soul from the devil and not to repeat the case of the first men where everything was visible, and thus Satan tempted him and poisoned his soul. David's soul grows and emerges from the unexpected and the impossible. From the people, places, and situations through which there is no possibility to imagine that such a holy soul can come, that's where it comes from. Who could have imagined that King David would come from the house of idolaters? From idolaters, Lot, Abraham's nephew, slept with his daughters and was drunk, from whom Moab was born. Through the birth of Ruth the Moabite, who married Boaz the great of the generation, and through Nitzaveh, Badadale, Jesse's wife. From the first man to the house of David lineage throughout all generations, we have seen protection through covering and concealment. King David, who was allotted only 3 hours of life in this world, yet lived for 70 years against all odds, at the expense of the 70 years of the gift of life he received from the first men. Through the marriage of Boaz and Ruth the Moabite, who, immediately after the wedding night, Boaz died, doubts were raised about the allowance of Moabites in the congregation of Israel. Jesse, David's father, was a completely righteous man who had never tasted sin and had given birth to successful and righteous sons until the birth of David. He hid David for fear that he was born of a bastard who would stain his whole family. Only from the cover can the discovery take place. Out of the darkness of the covering, the light of a king emerges. Out of the impossible was born King David, who from his descendants will reign as king forever and ever. All the covering and hiding of King David's huge soul is to confuse the devil and prevent him from harming and hindering the holy soul from reaching this world and shining the light of the Messiah in the world. Although David was already 28, his father still referred to him affectionately as the little one. There is still the youngest. 1 Samuel 16 verse 10. Jesse's wife, Nitzaveh Badadale, was struck with great grief because her husband had left her. The slave, upon seeing Nitzaveh, Jesse's wife, yearning for her husband, went and gave her signs, just as Rachel had done when she gave signs to Leah. Nitzaveh became very holy and prayed to God, and in place of the slave, God gave her pregnancy. However, Jesse had thought he was coming for his slave, but he was actually coming for his wife Nitzaveh, who had become pregnant without his knowledge. David was born as a result. When the sons of Jesse saw that their mother was pregnant, despite their father's divorce from her, they told their father that their mother had become pregnant by a stranger, and therefore they should kill her and the baby in her womb, David. At that time, Jesse was overcome with great sorrow and said to his sons, "Let her give birth and do not bring slander against her." And then the rejected David was born, who did not mix with the people of Israel. To avoid disgrace, David was rejected by his family and sent to tend the sheep far from his home, his parents, and his brothers. And so, David became the black sheep. The people, who did not know why David was distant from his entire family, thought ill of him and accused him of many things. They suspected that there was a bad culture in Jesse's house. David's birth was the last and greatest cover before the enormous revelation of his light and his anointing as king over all Israel. David's secret was kept hidden from his father and brothers, as well as all the people of his generation, and even from the prophet Samuel, who was like Moses and Aaron, until God said to him. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, this is the one." 1 Samuel 16 verse 12. David was born into suffering and experienced sorrow, trouble, until his death. Despite his many and severe sufferings, he accepted them with love. I am a foreigner to my own family, a stranger to my own mother's children. Psalm 69 verse 8. David has brothers and sisters who all live together in Bethlehem, but he is considered a foreigner in their eyes, even though he is innocent of any crime. When I weep and fast, I must endure scorn. When I put on sackcloth, people make sport of me. Psalm 69 verses 10 to 11. Even fasting and prayer did not make David pure in the eyes of his brothers. I am forgotten as though I were dead, I have become like broken pottery. Psalms 31 verse 12. The elders of Israel spoke harshly about him. Is he trustworthy or not, since he came from Moab? Those who sit at the gate mock me, and I am the song of the drunkards. Psalm 69 verse 12. The story of the anointing of David as king by the prophet Samuel. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way, I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king." 1 Samuel 16 verse 1. This is the only place in the Bible where it is said to mourn a living person. Even though Samuel the prophet mourned for Saul, he hastened to fulfill God's commandment, even though it posed a danger to his life, to anoint a new king while King Saul was still in front of him. It was clear to the elders of Bethlehem, who were anxious for him and received him with holy fear, that Samuel the prophet of God, equal to Moses and Aaron, had come to them only as God's messenger. Indeed, Samuel the prophet came to Bethlehem to anoint David as king and to reign as the Messiah of God. Samuel arrived at Jesse's house, and when he saw Eliab, Jesse's firstborn, who was beautiful and as tall as Saul, he thought that God had chosen him to be king. However, God told him otherwise. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7. As Jesse passed his sons before Samuel the prophet, Samuel came to pour oil on their heads, but the oil would run away from them. So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him, we will not sit down until he arrives." 1 Samuel 16 verse 11. At the time, David was 28 years old, but he was humbling and reducing himself. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, this is the one." 1 Samuel 16 verse 12. Get up. My Messiah is standing, and you are sitting. When David arrived, the oil ran of its own accord and fell on David's head. Despite his red hair, which suggests anger and bloodshed, David was elected king. David's confusing appearance is the secret of the enormous concealment that God provides for David and his descendants, so that Satan cannot harm this great soul. A person is not determined by his external appearance, but by his internal character and worth. David is not only a red-hair man, but a red hair with good eyes. Although he was on his sword and fought wars, David fought only God's wars throughout his life, and therefore did not get to build God's temple. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? Psalm 139 verse 21. King David shed blood to destroy the enemies of Israel and to bring peace to Israel from all its foes. He was full of humility and devotion, he was deeply devoted to his flock. God, observing his devotion to his flock, declared, "It is fitting that you should be the shepherd of my people." David always knew his situation, even when he was at the bottom of the ladder. In the book of Zohar, it is written, "Whoever humbles himself before God, God exalts him above everything." King David always humbled himself before God. David always knew, with true humility, that God watches over every step that humans take, and that the world is not desolate. This is the story of King David's arrival in the world, the story of a pure soul that becomes a king from darkness to light, and all in secret for the sake of success. We hope you learned something new today. If you did, give this video a like and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more informative and entertaining content. See you next time.